What up, fam? Oh my gosh, this is awesome. We got a nice little group on here on the live. Since I had y'all waiting, y'all are popping on and commenting. That's awesome. Sorry for the delay. Welcome to another Monday Masterclass with your girl, Coach Nat, the Keto Bikini Pro. Just got back from a great shoulder pump, shoulder and legs, because I'm testing out a new program. So for all of you in the academy and all of you who are thinking about joining us, little plug, all of the information is going out this week about our next challenge. It is the biggest challenge of the year, the Shape and Shred Challenge. I have changed the name again. Each summer, we relaunch our biggest program of the year. It's where we give away all of the biggest prizes with the biggest potential opportunity for a couple of grand prize winners to get free private coaching with myself or Coach Mary Grace inside the academy. We're giving away academy membership. We're giving away this year a deposit to a future KBB retreat, including our next retreat this year coming up in October at the Olympia in Las Vegas. So the web page just went live last night, so it is already up about the challenge. You can check that out on my website. The link is in the description below, nataliejgrasso.com. All the information is now up there about the challenge as well as the retreat. So retreat deposits have opened up. So if you've been thinking about coming with us to Vegas, we'd love to have you. You can make your deposit now and hold your spot in the house. So more to come on all of that. I'll be posting it on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all the things. So you can look out for that this week. But I just had to give a little plug for that. As I've been thinking about the next few masterclass topics, including tonight's topic, all about baselining, I've got the challenge in mind, knowing we're having some new folks coming in, and we've got some folks returning after a little break from the academy. So it's a really good time to talk about baselining. I just got back from the low carb cruise and I am baselining this week. So I thought, what a perfect time to talk about what I mean when I say baselining and what it actually looks like. Like, how am I doing it this week? Exactly what am I asking you to do when I say you need to baseline before you set macros for a cut, or make any plans for a cut. But not just for a cut, it can be going into any new phase, any new goal. So I think it'll be applicable to many things. But the future masterclasses I am planning, next week we will do our monthly live Ask Me Anything Q&A. So that'll be the last Monday of the month of June. And that will be consistent. The last Monday of every month, we will do the live Q&A. After that, July 7th is when we officially start our challenge. So that is when I believe I am planning to do a masterclass about after action report. Coach Bronson and I just talked about that on our coffee chat yesterday. So that inspired that masterclass, talking about the postmortem or the after action report. Or really, I want to show you all what we use for our check-ins inside the academy and walk through why do we ask the things that we ask and how do you get the most out of that. So that'll be beneficial for our members, our new members, as well as anyone out there coaching themselves. Because really what I try to do on these masterclasses is help you learn how to do this on your own. Of course, we would love to have you inside the academy anytime, and we will help you out, give you as much handholding as we can, as you need, and help you put some training wheels on until you're able to do it yourself. And even then, you'll probably fall in love with us, as many of our members do, and want to stick around just for the community and the extra push and the accountability that we give. But with that in mind, that and then Miss Karen gave me an idea the other week for another masterclass about assessing your progress as it relates to your training performance, because I have talked about assessing progress in your fat loss phase, in whatever phase you're in. I'm not sure actually if I've done a masterclass on that. I know I have done a lesson on that inside of our challenges and inside the academy, but I don't think I've done a masterclass on it. So that will likely be something I will do sometime in the next month in July. But assessing performance, how do you actually assess, am I improving in my training? Is my performance improving in the gym? What to expect? So that's coming up. Those are coming up in July as we get started with the challenge. I think those will be great things for you all to do, even if you are not a part of the challenge, to kind of learn these things alongside us and be tracking these things for yourselves. So speaking of tracking, that's what tonight's masterclass is all about, baselining. So before I dive in, let me just shout out some folks on here live. We've got, of course, Coach Mary Grace. We've got Hannah, Kim, Lola is on, Isabel, Amanda is on, Michelle is on. Awesome. All right. As always, if you have questions during the masterclass, feel free to pop them into the chat. I will be happy to answer them if they relate to the topic. And if not, I will hold those questions until the end. And if we don't have time and they don't fit with the topic this week, I will put them on the list for next week, because we are doing the Ask Me Anything. So everything is fair game in terms of questions for next week. Hey, Pilar, what is going on, mama? 5150 Keto Warrior. Hello. That's a cool name there on your YouTube. All right, ladies. So let's dive into tonight's topic without further ado. Baselining. How to baseline your data before starting a cut or whatever phase or goal you're going into. So what does that really entail? What do you need to do before you start your cut to ensure that you put into place a solid, successful plan? All right. What up, Deb? Deb is on. Yay. Okay. So tonight, if you put everything into place that I recommend here tonight, if you're doing this on your own, and if you're in the academy, we give you the structure and the format for which to do it. If you approach your next cut or your next physical health, wellness, fitness goal this way, you will put yourself in a much better position to actually get the results that you are looking for, rather than relying on some kind of online macro calculator to tell you what you should be eating, or somebody's random meal plan, or some keto cookbook that is not specifically designed for you and your goals and your current status. So learning how to baseline for yourself is everything. This is a game changer. And I always say, if you've been away for any length of time from a consistent training program, macros, tracking your food, any particular diet, you absolutely must baseline before you make changes. Why? We're going to talk about what is baselining, when do you baseline, why do you baseline, and of course, how to do it. Okay, so what is baselining? Simply put, it's gathering data. It is the first step to literally anything. If you work a job and you are getting ready to start a project, you're going to do some kind of baselining before you just dive into the project. In any activity, in any area of life, we baseline before we make changes to things. So it could also be called discovery. It's the discovery phase. Shout out to all my legal folks out there. Or benchmarking, to all of my athletes. What do you do? Or all of my statisticians or all of my data nerds, you benchmark. If you're into investing, benchmarking is a thing in investing, right? So none of these things are new, but you can apply them to your health and fitness journey. So in legal terms, for example, what does discovery mean? The discovery process. It is the pre-trial process where the parties in a lawsuit, for example, exchange information and evidence to prepare for trial. or settlement. It allows each side to present information to the other side, to understand the other's case, to evaluate their own and the others, and potentially negotiate a resolution in this case. So the primary goal of a discovery process in the case of a legal case, for example, is to ensure a fair trial by allowing all parties to access relevant information before the trial begins. It prevents surprises during the trial and allows for informed decision-making. Does that sound like some of the things you want to have in place before you start your diet or your workout program or your fat loss goal or your whatever you want to call that phase for yourself? You want to understand and evaluate and ensure a successful process. You want to gather relevant information, and you want to prevent surprises, and you want to allow for informed decision-making along the path or the process. So you need to do your own form of discovery, which is baselining. As it relates to benchmarking, another term you could use, definition of benchmarking is to evaluate or check something by comparison with a standard. So you can benchmark where you're starting from, and that's your standard. Going forward, now you have something to evaluate against. If you do not baseline at the beginning, you have nothing to evaluate your progress against. And we'll get to that in a minute about why it's so important. Actually, let's dive into why next. Why do you baseline? Because, number one, without knowing where you're starting from, how can you plan your course ahead? You've got to start with where you are. And especially important for your mental game throughout especially in a fat loss phase where our limbic brain is going to be playing tricks on us. How will you assess progress? If you've been assessing progress by how you feel, that is a poor indicator. Feelings are not facts. So gather the facts. Where am I now? And everybody wants to skip this step because nobody's ever happy to look at where they're starting from. We just want to go where we want to go. We want to get the fat off. We want to get the body we want. We don't want to look at or think about the body we currently have, especially going into a fat loss phase. We're just like, give me macros, give me a meal plan, tell me what I need to do, and I'm going to do it. But I don't want to look at anything now. Don't make me get on the scale. Don't make me look in the mirror. Don't make me take pictures. Because I don't like the way I look right now. Well, like it or not, a week in, 2 weeks in, 4 weeks in, 6 weeks in, if you didn't get that information on the front end, you have no idea whether you're making progress or not. Okay. So you got to look at the stuff that you don't want to look at the beginning to make progress going forward. And as far as a coach is concerned, we'll get into this. This is part of the when to baseline. One of the times when you would want to baseline is when you're starting with a coach or in a program. Your coach is going to ask you for this data going into the program, going into the challenge. This is one of the things we ask in our intake forms. We're going to get into what are the things that we are baselining when we get to the how, but we are going to ask you for a bunch of information about where you're starting from. And a lot of the time I get intake forms that are very vague, or a person hasn't been tracking, so they have no data starting out, and that's fine. What we do is then ask for them to baseline. That's the very first step that we do with new members in the academy, or when we start a new challenge, we ask the first week to be a baselining week. But I will tell you, and part of the how, we're going to talk about how long do you need to baseline. It would be better for you to start tracking some of these things before you even start a new program. Because for us, we say, okay, give me 7 days of data, minimum 7 days of data before we can help you set your starting targets, make your plan, evaluate anything. But that's a very short period of time to have to make decisions off of. If we had 2 weeks or 4 weeks of information from you, that would be even better. We would get a better picture and we'd be able to make you a better plan. So think about starting with a new coach like starting with a new doctor. Would you just go to a doctor and not say anything about what you're experiencing, what your symptoms are, what your previous medications are? If you went into a doctor and you didn't give them a medical history, they wouldn't be able to do much for you. They're going to get some blood work. They're going to ask you a whole bunch of questions. And the less information you give them, the less helpful they're going to be. The more information you can give them, the more helpful they can be. So think about it just like that, just like keeping a list of your medications and supplements and symptoms and diagnoses and a medical history to share with your doctor. Think about baselining as what you're sharing with your coach. Now, if you don't have a coach and you're doing this on your own, when should you baseline? After a period of not tracking, not following a structured nutrition or training plan, after taking a diet break, after a vacation, or just simply after not being consistent for a while, not being dialed in, kind of every once in a while going to the gym, every once in a while tracking your food, but you don't have a good full picture of what you've been doing consistently over the last few weeks. Anytime you have a departure from consistency or tracking or both is the time to baseline. You never want to just dive into a new protocol, some new trend, some new fasting method, some new diet, or cutting or establishing macros without baselining first. That's a recipe for disaster. And you could end up doing more harm than good if you didn't know where you were starting from. My perfect example of this is when people come to us and they've been eating 800 calories a day, or they've been fasting every other day for 24 hours, alternate day fasting. So they're barely eating anything. If we have that information, then we say, okay, let's baseline for a week. Let's look at what you're eating. And when we look at it and we see, oh, they are barely eating anything, the last thing we're going to do is cut. We cannot cut you from there. There's nowhere to go from there. So that's when we would likely recommend a restoration phase where we are increasing your food and we're working on building your metabolism so you can handle eating more. If you came into us and we just assumed that you were overeating because you want to lose body fat, because I can't tell you how many times I have people come in and they want to lose body fat, but they're barely eating as it is. And I've had many times people who just want to cut. And they think that's the answer. They want us to put them on a cut. They want us to put them on a diet. If I just used an online calculator to determine what your deficit should be based on your estimated total daily energy expenditure, TDEE, based on a calculator, I would probably have you eating double what you're eating, and all of a sudden you'd start gaining and you wouldn't understand why. And I wouldn't understand why if I don't have that data going in. So that's just a really good example of why we need to baseline. All right, so when to do it: after a period of not tracking, after being unstructured or just taking a break, typically definitely before a cutting phase, but like I said, it could be before any new phase, new goal, new season, changes in your goals. So if you're going from a cut to a restoration phase or a reverse diet, as we call it, if you're going from a restoration phase into a building phase, so where essentially restoration or reverse dieting is finding your new maintenance. Once you've found your maintenance and you are working to push into a bit of a surplus to go into a building phase to focus on muscle building, that could be time again for baselining. However, I will say if you have already been in a cut, if you have already been tracking consistently, if you are coming out of a cutting phase where you're tracking consistently, if you're coming out of a restoration phase into a building phase where you have been tracking consistently, and if you're going from a building phase into a cut or a maintenance phase into a cut, and you have already been tracking, you don't need to baseline. You've already baselined. Simply by tracking what you're doing consistently and tracking your results consistently, you already have that data. So baselining is when you do not have that data. So example for me, before I went on the low carb cruise a couple of weeks ago, it's been almost 2 weeks now since we left, I was in a maintenance phase, end of my off-season building season, if you will. I knew that this low carb cruise was right at the end of that building season and right before I start my cut. So I decided that for the entire trip, I wasn't going to track anything. I didn't track my weight. I didn't track my food. I didn't track my training. I didn't track my activity level aside from glancing at my step count from day to day. So I mainly didn't track for the most part. I took a full diet break. I allowed foods I don't normally eat, a lot more fruit than usual. I didn't go crazy, but I ate intuitively. So I don't know where my macros landed for the last 2 weeks. I don't know what my weight was doing throughout that time. I have not been tracking any of that. So coming back 2 weeks, one and a half to 2 weeks of not knowing anything, this week I am baselining. And I'm just giving myself a week because I know where I was before the vacation. It's only a 2-week break. And now I'm getting back to essentially finding that maintenance again where I was right before the cruise. It's not going to take more than a week for me to figure that out. If, however, I had been not tracking for 6 months, many times you might go on a diet and follow a structured plan for a few months and then not do any of that for a while, for 6 months, for a year or more. If it's been a much longer time where you don't have any data, you're likely going to need to baseline a little bit longer. 3-4 weeks would probably be a great time to do a great amount of time. So, all right. So that's the what, when, and why. What, why, and when. Let's talk about how. So the first thing, what needs to be baselined? What are we baselining? First step in the how is determine what you are baselining. Determine your metrics. And I'm going to give you a suggestion of the metrics that we track and what I recommend that you track. And then you can track as much as you want above and beyond this, or you can choose to track less than this. Totally up to you. But the more you track, the better, because when that limbic brain starts screaming and crying and creating all this emotion and making you want to quit, it's going to be helpful to have more data points rather than less, so that you don't just get stuck on the scale, for example. Okay, so first thing we baseline is our body composition or biometrics. We ask our ladies to track weight on the scale daily. Most of the things I'm going to mention here, we want to be tracking daily. Some of these you can do weekly. I'll talk about which ones to do weekly. But we ask for weight and body fat percentage daily. We recommend using a home scale that is a digital scale that will give you weight and body composition. So at minimum, weight and body fat percentage. Many of these scales these days give you a lot more metrics than that. And I actually did a masterclass all about smart scales and the metrics that they track and which ones matter and which ones don't. So I will add that to the description below this video so you can check out that masterclass for a more in-depth deep dive on smart scales. And I think I probably gave my recommendations of smart scales there as well. And I do have a code. Coach Bronson has a code for InBody. If you want to get an InBody home system, that is what we use. That should be below in the description as well, along with all of my other discount links. So biometrics, weight and body composition, weight and body fat percentage at minimum. If you know your weight and your body fat percentage, you can determine your body fat mass in pounds or kilograms. You can determine your lean body mass or fat-free mass in pounds or kilograms. So as long as you have those two metrics, you can also determine kind of exact how many pounds of fat, how many pounds of lean mass you have on your body. So you don't have to track those separately, but we like to track weight and body fat percentage because they fluctuate day to day. These scales are not super sophisticated, so they only look at essentially body fat and non-body fat, and they try to determine that with bioelectrical impedance. So when you are more or less hydrated and many, many other things that impact the scale, your weight and your body fat percentage are going to fluctuate day to day. So we want you to see those fluctuations day to day so you can learn to become desensitized to those, and so that you can take weekly averages. You can take a 7-day average each week and see, okay, weekly, where are we trending? That really helps you to determine the trends. But I won't dive too much into that, but it's one of the reasons why we do these things daily. So weight, body fat percentage, measurements. We generally recommend taking measurements weekly, although I will say, if you are a lean individual, if you are already in a healthy body fat percentage range and you're relatively lean and you're wanting to get leaner, measurements are not going to change that often. So sometimes, I mean, if you are starting out athletically lean and trying to get to competition level lean, then weekly measurements may be beneficial. If you have a lot of body fat to lose, then measurements may be very beneficial. But if you're kind of in that in-between range of normal, healthy body fat, and you have maybe 10 pounds, 15 pounds to lose, and when you lose that 10 to 15 pounds, you're not going to be stage lean, measurements, you may want to do that every other week or even once a month, because they're not going to change as frequently. I like our ladies to do it weekly because of number one, just the consistency of showing up and doing this, whether you want to or not, but also because cycles change things. And when we're holding water weight and things of that nature, it can impact our measurements. So we want to be comparing apples to apples. Either make sure that you're taking your measurements at the same time in your cycle every month. And for a lot of us in perimenopause, our cycles are different lengths every month. So if we only picked once a month, like we do it the 30th of every month, or we do it the 4th Sunday of every month, we might be in a different stage of our cycle, one of those 4th Sundays of the month than the other. And then we might get upset when we're only tracking those measurements infrequently and something is throwing off our fluid balance and making it appear, that our waist measurement is bigger than we thought it would be or something like that. Okay. And then photos. I would put photos in the category of body composition or biometrics, because the scale, the body fat percentage, the measurements, they can be a little finicky from time to time, but the photos don't lie. If you're taking photos consistently, and the other reason we take photos weekly is the same reason we take the measurements weekly. If there's something throwing off your fluid balance, and it doesn't just have to be cycle, there's a lot of other things that throw off fluid balance and impact the scale and impact the body fat percentage and impact the measurements. It can also impact your photos if you're feeling bloated because of a particular meal, or eating later than usual, or dining out at a restaurant. So if things are changing the way you appear in photos, you don't only want to be comparing, you want to try to compare apples to apples. So the more consistently you can take photos, we recommend weekly, the better, because now you'll have more comparisons you can make over time. Okay, so that's body composition. That's all the biometric stuff. Biofeedback. This is absolutely massive. This is one of the things we push more than anything for our ladies to really understand their bodies and what's going on, because you need to know your body. And this is the best way that you can figure it out. Biofeedback. What do I mean by that? It is the feedback that your body is giving you through different kinds of symptoms and feelings and experiences. So the big ones we ask our ladies to track are energy levels throughout the day, mood, libido, sleep, hunger, water consumption, but I'm going to put that under nutrition for the purposes here. So you can add anything else you want to this list. If you have a medical condition and you are tracking the symptoms of that medical condition, include those symptoms in your biofeedback. Anything else you want to track, add it to your biofeedback. If you want to look at digestion, digestion is another thing we ask about, digestion and bowel habits. So are things moving smoothly? Are you constipated? Are you having diarrhea? Like, look at all of that, because things are going to happen along this journey. And what we see a lot of the time is, oh, I just increased my protein and now I'm not pooping. Okay, well, let's look at what's going on. You might not be drinking enough water. You might not have enough electrolytes. You might not be eating enough fat. So we want to have a full picture, and the biofeedback is absolutely incredible for that. And you can track these as often as you want. We only ask for it weekly from our members. We ask them to kind of consider the week as a whole and then give the week a rating. But if you want to do this daily, many of our members do it daily so they can remember by the end of the week, okay, how did this week go? I had some high days, I had some low days, where would those average out? You can keep a journal, a written journal, a notebook. I'm going to talk about kind of how to track it, where you can track it, some resources for tracking. But if you're a pen and paper kind of gal, you can do it that way. You can do it multiple times a day if you want to. You can track your energy in the morning versus the afternoon versus the evening. And you can put some numbers to these things. So if you're an Oura Ring wearer, I'm not going to shoot you the bird right now because it's on my middle finger. But if you wear an Oura Ring, you can use that to also track your recovery score that it gives you, or resilience, whatever that is. Mary Grace, tell me what that score is. Your sleep score and your sleep timing, you can grab all of that data from your wearable. And those are things that can help you assess how good is your sleep. And you can give it a rating according to quality and quantity. So basically anything that's important to you can go into your biofeedback. How thirsty you are throughout the day. You could track your thirst. Readiness. Thank you, Mary Grace. I was like, it was an R word of some sort. Readiness score. Yeah, so you can use all that stuff to track your biofeedback. Gym, sports, athletic performance. Any sport you play, any physical activity that you do, particularly if you are training in the gym, if you follow a strength training program, you want to be tracking your training statistics or metrics. So you want to look at, what is your 1 rep max on your squat right now? We don't work toward a 1 rep max in our programs, but our app does give you an estimated 1 rep max for all of your exercises. So you can benchmark, baseline, where am I at with my training right now? What is my total volume? How much am I lifting? How many sets, how many reps, how much weight on a particular exercise? You can total it up for your whole workout. Our app will give you this is how many pounds you lifted in this workout total. It'll give you an animal. So it's kind of fun how the app gives you which animal, how many corgis you lifted today or something like that. It's kind of fun. Oh, cool. Okay, so Oura has a resilience feature as well that shows trends over time of readiness and sleep together. Ooh, that's something I should look into now that I've had it for a little while. I always say to Mary Grace, I need to learn more about what my Oura can do because I haven't checked it all out. So track your sports performance, track your gym performance, track how you're feeling in your training. What was your rate of perceived exertion? How hard do you believe you worked? That's another thing that our app will do. At the end of your workout, it asks you, how did that feel? And you can say challenging, moderate, difficult. You can give it a rating there. Let's see. All right. So body composition or biometrics, biofeedback, sports performance or athletic performance, gym performance. Another thing you can track with gym performance, I'll just note, because a lot of our ladies are working toward getting their first pull-up. So how many pull-ups can you currently do? How many push-ups can you currently do? Certain things like that are more skill-based, skill-based and strength-based. You can track your progression toward those. And then nutrition. So the big one, when we are baselining, we need to track what we are already eating. This is another thing. Nobody ever wants to track their food if they don't have macros to follow. They always want the macros first. Raise your hand, speak in the chat if you've ever said out loud or to yourself, well, once I have macros, then I'll start tracking. Or if I don't have macros to follow, I don't know what to eat. So I don't know how to track my food if I don't have macros to follow. That's a limiting belief. We need to start where we are. I always say to the ladies when they come in, if you ate donuts yesterday, track the donuts. We're not here to judge you. We just want to see where you're starting from, the numbers. And for those who are a little squeamish about showing us your macros, don't worry, we can't see your foods. I wish we could. It would make it a lot easier, but our app syncs with Chronometer, and Chronometer does not share the details of your food logs. So we can only see the numbers. So if that makes you feel a little bit better about tracking that piece of sourdough bread you didn't want us to know you ate, just track what you're already eating. So same thing with if you're doing this for yourself. I know that when we are not eating what we consider to be perfectly or good or healthy or low carb or keto or whatever title we deem is worthy, that we don't want to see it. But your stomach saw it. Your digestive system saw it. Your body saw it. Your body is not going to ignore what you're eating. So stop ignoring the numbers. And I've said this recently on a masterclass, but the practical step I took to get out of bulimia, to get out of binge eating, was tracking my binges. There was nothing more powerful at that time of my life than to see what I was doing to myself by the numbers. It made all the difference when I finally committed to looking at what I was doing. Ooh, Hannah. Good example here. I stopped myself from eating a piece of cake the other night because I realized I wouldn't know how to track it accurately and would throw off the accuracy of my data. This is one of the powerful things about tracking and why tracking is so beneficial to us, particularly in a fat loss phase or any phase or any time. I mean, it really doesn't matter what phase, because all of the phases are about caring about what we're putting in our body and how we're nourishing ourselves for a particular goal, whether it's fat loss, muscle building, or anything in between. So when we are tracking for a purpose or for a goal, this is a perfect example of why it really makes us think twice about eating something that's not so aligned with our goals. So that's a beautiful example there. And so, but if we are starting and you're asking somebody to give you macros for keto and you've been eating 500 carbs a day, maybe you need an approach that takes your carbs down a little bit so that you can ease into it rather than jumping in overnight. So it's just yet another example of why we want to baseline before we just dive into something new. it could be too drastic of a change overnight once we understand our numbers. Okay. So nutrition. What do we want to track? Obviously, our food. Our food, our macros, our calories. And our micros come along with that too. And if you're using Chronometer, which is our recommended nutrition tracking app, that's one of the two that our app syncs with. Chronometer has the most accurate database out there because they vet the entries, the food entries in there very well. You will still see some entries in there that are a little bit off, but it's not as bad as MyFitnessPal. MyFitnessPal, anybody and everybody puts all kinds of stuff in there and it may not be accurate. So, and I can't speak to other apps because I've never used any of the other apps out there, but Chronometer is what we recommend. The other cool thing about Chronometer is that it does track your micronutrients. So the micronutrients you're getting from your foods, vitamins, minerals, you can track your supplements, and then you can look at your overall micronutrients for the day or for the week using their reports. So that is a really cool additional item to track, especially if you know something about your micronutrient profile, if you know you're low on vitamin D, if you know you're low on magnesium, if you've had your B12 and your folate checked and you know that those are low, or you're trying to get your iron up, you can look at how much of those things you're getting from your food and supplement intake in a day. And you can adjust your foods to boost up certain nutrients that you're trying to get more of. So really helpful to track beyond just the macros and the calories, looking also at the micros. Also water, and Chronometer recently added a way to track water in their app. So that's really cool too. If you're a person who struggles with remembering how much water you've drank in a day. My little pro tip there is to use a large container. Like I use a jug when I'm home. It's just a regular pitcher. When I'm traveling, it's a larger, like a 64 ounce travel with a handle water jug pitcher thing. Or on the cruise, because I wasn't really tracking, I just refilled this a bunch of times throughout the day, which sometimes can be tricky to remember how many times I refilled it. So when I'm at home, I use that pitcher. It's about 80 ounces. I fill it up with my water and my electrolytes the night before. So I drink that throughout the day. Then I know I've had my 80 ounces. And then usually I go for another 20, at least when I'm super dialed in a cut. Usually I aim for about 100 ounces. So that's just me. But let's see. I'm going to talk about the other couple of things that you want to be tracking, and then we'll talk about getting into the nitty-gritty of how to track. We can talk a little bit more nitty-gritty about how to track your nutrition and some pro tips there. Although I do also have a masterclass about that, I believe. I'll double check. If I do, then I will add that to the description box as well. All right, so beyond nutrition, you also want to be tracking your activity level. This is super, super important for determining the plan going forward in terms of if you were coming to me as a competition prep client and we were on a timeline to lose a certain amount of body fat by a certain date, that is a very important timeline, more important than a lifestyle client. You might have a wedding or a family reunion or a vacation you want to cut down for, but you are not getting on stage in practically nothing in front of judges and spending a ton of money to do so, and time and effort and trying to, basically it's a much, much more difficult process. And it requires a lot more for competitors, and there's a lot more on the line. So as a competitor, if you were coming to me and we're about to set your plan and I don't know how active you've been, that's going to throw off the plan entirely. If you've been doing a whole bunch of cardio and you don't tell me that you've been doing a whole bunch of cardio, and I think you're doing none, that is I'm going to set a different plan for you than I would have if I knew you were doing an hour a day already. So activity level, by activity level, I mean, generally I like to see a step count. It's just kind of a catch-all way of understanding your level of activity throughout your day. It's not always perfect. There's always problems with these step count trackers that are not terribly accurate, but it gives us a ballpark of how much you're moving throughout the day. So I like step count. Cardio, if you are doing any kind of structured cardio activity, and this is anything from a group fitness class, even if you're holding weights in your hands, that's not weight training, that's cardio. If it is timed, if you are following along with an instructor and there is music and they are timing what you're doing, it is cardio. So you want to count, and you'll count your yoga class as cardio. You'll count your Pilates class as cardio. Any activity that is not pure strength training, resistance training, generally not timed, I would consider that to be a cardio workout. If you're running, cycling, sprinting, doing at-home workout videos once again, to a timer, cardio. If you're getting your heart rate up, cardio. So you want to track the time. How much time are you spending, the duration of your cardio session, how many times per week you're doing it, and your intensity level. How intense is that cardio? So all of that will give us a picture of your overall activity level, and we need to manage that with your intake. I cannot give you macros and expect to know if you're in a deficit or not if I don't know what your activity level is. Very important to manage those two together. Amanda said yoga is not cardio. Well, it depends on what yoga we're talking about. If you're doing, what is it, yin yoga, that's like basically breathing and resting, then okay, you don't have to count that as cardio. But if you're doing hot yoga, if you're doing vinyasa yoga, if you're doing any of these like strength yoga, those are all cardio. It certainly is not strength training. Not the same thing. So I'd put that in the cardio camp. It is activity that is not strength training. So kind of think about it like that. It counts towards your activity level if it's active. If it's restorative yoga, like yin yoga, then yeah, you don't have to count that toward cardio because you're not going to get your heart rate up. But if your heart rate is getting up, it's cardio. Your body sees it that way. In fact, some of these sauna sessions, if you're going to the sauna regularly, make sure your coach knows that. Make sure you're tracking that. I did not include that in the list, but that just made me think of it. Sauna can throw things off. So track your sauna activity. Okay, so that's the what to track. How to track it. So I talked about our app, for example, and some other apps. So there are lots of apps that you can use to plug in this information and be able to see it in a dashboard. That's what we have inside the Academy. And it syncs up with other things like your wearables. So apps and wearables are a great way to track some of this stuff. I personally like to track it also in a spreadsheet. I have, and this is something that's available to our members, it is the ultimate KBB, what do I call it? Tracker, progress tracker, the ultimate KBB progress tracker. I took my progress tracker and over the years, I added a lot more data to it. I was tracking a ton of data last year. For my last prep, I started tracking my blood glucose. I started tracking my ketones. I was tracking my hormones for a period of time. I was using one of those essentially fertility monitors that monitor your estrogen, progesterone metabolites. And I was tracking that daily. So, and that was for perimenopause because I was prepping in perimenopause. So I was tracking my cycle. If you are not, I didn't put this down there, but I need to add this. We have to track our menstrual cycle. If you are still having menstrual cycles, even if you're in perimenopause and they are few and far between, even more so if you're in perimenopause and they're few and far between, even more so you want to be tracking your cycle. When are you getting it? How long are you bleeding? You know, all of those things, your symptoms related to it. A lot of our ladies learn a ton about their bodies through understanding the symptoms throughout their cycle and what they go through. And then they can get ahead of it if they can anticipate it, like getting really hungry in your luteal phase, losing a lot of strength and getting really tired and low energy during your luteal phase, poor mood during your luteal phase. So you're not surprised. Remember why we do the discovery process. So you're not surprised when it happens and then diving into the cupcakes because you can't control yourself. When it comes on and you say, oh, I know what this is. It's got to be my hormones. Don't fall for this trick and think that I need to dive into the chocolate and all the things just because this is a natural thing that's going to happen every month or every other month or whatever, depending on what phase of your life you're in. And also one more thing I didn't mention, but that's blood work. I'm not going to go into that in detail at all. Eventually, I would like to do a masterclass on blood work, but I still have a lot of questions about blood work personally that I want to understand better before I do that masterclass, or I may have an expert come on and talk about it. But in general, I always recommend at least getting the basics through your doctor or your insurance once a year minimum. Ideally, I'd say a couple of times a year. Get the general recommended labs that doctors will run. And if you have any particular diagnoses, so things that are specific to your health status, which your doctor should be running tests related to those things as frequently as they need to monitor your condition, then for you, you may need to look into additional blood work. If you're trying to understand your hormonal status, I always say, at least learn to baseline that. So if you've never had a female hormone panel done, and a lot of the time these are not offered through insurance and they make you jump through all the hoops to do it, I highly recommend going to a third party and getting that lab work. I think I still have the link to Own Your Labs listed in my description box. We did have a code for that. I don't know if it still works or not, but ownyourlabs.com is a really affordable place to get your own blood work. For hormones, I generally use personally and recommend lifeextension.com. They are a supplement company. Life Extension also sells blood work, so third-party testing. So you can order it through them and you can bring it to your LabCorp, and if you have a local LabCorp near you, and get your blood work done that way. That's where I get my hormones labs done most of the time because it's very affordable. They do bundles that make it more affordable. So female hormone panel, at least start baselining that if you've never looked at your hormones before. All right, so spreadsheet. Spreadsheet is my favorite because I get to see everything in one place. I have a column for each marker, and then I have the date. And it's just daily, and then I have a weekly average bar that averages everything up for the week. Totals up my cardio time for the week so I can see how many total minutes of cardio I did. And then I have my workout listed, my training listed, and all the other data points that I mentioned. Ooh, Mary Grace shared that Life Extension is currently running their 25% off lab sale, by the way. Awesome. I always try to take advantage of these deals when they have them because they're already good prices, get even better, and then you can hold on to it for I think like 6 months. I think it's good. I think the lab order is good for 6 months. So even if you're not ready to get the lab work right away, get in on these sales. They're the best. Okay, so aside from a spreadsheet or apps or wearables, you could just use a notebook. If you are a pen and paper lady, have a little journal where you keep track of these things. Nothing wrong with that at all. You can do it on a Google Doc if you want to type it in and keep it somewhere just on a Google Doc. Just capture it somewhere on paper, written down, so it's not all in your head. Because number one, we can't keep track of everything in our head. And number two, we start creating stories about things, about how we feel about something, rather than being able to see the data in black and white. All right, so aside from like the specific, what do you use to track these things? The other huge piece of the how is to set aside time in your day to allocate to capturing this data consistently. So I personally start my day with it. So once I've done my morning routine, my next step in my morning routine, before I dive into my emails, work, anything else, first thing I do when I sit down at my computer is I pull up my spreadsheet and I enter everything in for the previous day. And if I missed a day, then I go back and I add everything in for a day that I missed. If it's been 2 days or something, if something came up in the morning and I missed it. But that's my time. It's set part of my day. First thing. You might be a before bed kind of person. You check in and you want to add all your data in then, but set that time and make it consistent so you're not forgetting, you're missing days, because I'll tell you this, missing data renders the data useless, particularly with certain data more than others. But if I'm looking at data, client data for the week, and I'm like, okay, I'm trying to figure out what we're doing with your macros. I'm trying to figure out, if you've made progress. If I'm missing a whole bunch of biometrics, I don't get a good understanding of an average for the week. I can't really see what was going on there. If we have weight fluctuations on the scale, I like to be able to compare it to the macros and say, oh, okay, well, her carbs were 20 grams over that day, so that was water weight. So it'll come back off. Versus she gained 3 pounds of fat this week. We never want to make those assumptions. I look closely at those details to see what might be impacting that weight on the scale. And that's what I want you to be able to do. And that's why we baseline. So when we move forward and we're trying to evaluate our progress and assess our progress based off of that baseline, we're not just shooting in the dark. We don't only have one day of body composition data to look at 1 week later. If you track your baseline and then you don't track all week and then you track again the following week, you can't make decisions based on that. You don't have a full picture. I've said this to our members before about their macros. If you have a partially tracked day, if 3 out of the 7 days of the week, your days are partially tracked, so you might have breakfast in there, but you never tracked dinner and lunch and any other snacks, it's going to throw off the averages for the day and for the week. Now it looks like you underate. And I would be looking at that as a coach. And if I think that that data is accurate, I'm going to say, whoa, she's barely eating. She ate a lot less this week. I'm going to look at your activity level. Her activity level looks like it was the same or more, and she cut her food. Why is she not losing? And trust me, you don't want me to then take more food away from you because I think you ate less than you actually did. This is another reason why you want to be honest with yourself and honest with your coach. If there's something you ate that is not healthy and you don't want to report it, now your coach has bad information to go off of to make decisions about. So what's going to happen? We're going to end up cutting your food more. You're going to have less to eat than you did before. If you had given us all the data and we know that you overate, then we know why you're not losing. And we can look into that. We can say, okay, what happened here? Is there a behavior we need to work on? Is there a struggle or a challenge we need to help you with? Because as long as you're overeating, you're not going to make that progress. But if we don't know you're overeating because you're not tracking it, or if you overeat, or you have bites, licks, and tastes, BLTs, and you have snacks and extra things that you're not tracking, and then you get to the end of the week and you're mad that you're not losing because you didn't track any of that, and the data that you're looking at makes it look like you should be losing, now you're going to get in your head about it and get all emotional and probably end up eating off plan again. So track it all. Learn to see it as data. Don't look at it as meaning anything about you. Don't make it mean something that it doesn't mean. It's just data. I think we need a t-shirt. KBA, it's just data. It's okay. It's just data. So how long to baseline? 1 to 2 weeks should be a plenty of time to notice some initial insights, some initial observations, especially, as I mentioned, if you haven't been off plan or not tracking or inconsistent for a long period of time. So in my case, for example, I took a 2-week break from tracking. I was on vacation, so I know things were different than they normally are at home. So I'm just taking 1 week to baseline. But if you've been not doing anything, not tracking anything for months or years, you're just getting started, you may want 3 to 4 weeks of data to really understand, to start to really see the trends. I already mentioned it, but if you're inconsistent with your tracking, you will extend your timeline because you can't determine trends with dirty data. So when you decide to baseline, get serious about it and say, if I baseline, if I track hard consistently and dial in with what I'm tracking for 1 to 2 weeks, then that's all I'll need. But if I'm inconsistent and I'm tracking here and there, now I need more time. So it's up to you how long it takes to baseline. The more accurate you are and the more consistent you are, the shorter the time frame. Which is why I can say, all right, I'm going to do this for 7 days, and I'm already going to know where we're at and what we need to do next. So I wanted to give you all an example of the nutrition, of what I'm doing with nutrition since I just got home from my trip. Because one of the things that I hear from folks that make it difficult for them to baseline is, oh, how do I know what to choose to eat when I'm not trying to hit macros? So here's an example of, I was on a cruise ship. I had everything available to me. I did not have a scale. I wasn't measuring anything. I didn't buy the food myself. So while I could have, and Coach Mary Grace did this one day, could have kind of loosely tracked it to see where things were at, I didn't. So I honestly have no idea. I didn't try to estimate at all. Many of you, like Coach Mary Grace, like myself, who've been doing this for so long, probably could estimate just thinking about it. But I didn't even let myself do that. So I really have no idea what my intake was, macros wise, calories wise, day to day on the cruise ship. I know I ate 2 main meals a day. I ate to fullness, not even just satiety, not even just satisfaction. I ate certainly larger portions than I normally do at home. I was actually uncomfortable after some of my meals, which was likely due to the quantity and or inflammation from the way they might have cooked it, what might have been in it that I didn't know, all of those kinds of things. In addition to that, I was eating more carbs than usual in the form of fruit mostly. Fruit and nuts and seeds. But I do sometimes have nuts and seeds at home. And I do have fruit from time to time at home, but not that often. So I have all these factors that are difficult to quantify. I also was walking and moving a lot more than I am at home. I just noticed that today when I looked at my step count and I said, oh gosh, thinking about what the step count was, because I did see that every day on the cruise, it was anywhere from 12,000 steps a day to 20,000 steps a day, depending on the day. Today it's 8:15 p.m. here on the East Coast. I am at 8,500 steps today. So I'm not even going to break 10,000 steps today compared to what I was doing on the cruise. Major difference in my activity level. I also, though, trained a lot less than I do at home. So at home, prior to the cruise, I'm in my off season. I was in a kind of a building phase or a maintenance phase. So I was training and I was not doing cardio. So my step count at home was probably around, and I could tell you exactly if I look at my tracker, which I'm not looking at right now. But my lower days were around 5,000 or 6,000 steps. My higher days were around 10,000 steps at home, just from getting up, moving around, going to the gym, but not structured cardio. On the ship, constantly. We were just constantly moving. Mary Grace said her average was 19,000 last week. Yeah. So between getting off the ship and going and exploring the different ports, Mary Grace and Lana spent a lot of time in the wilderness, going and exploring long, like hikes. It was just a totally different lifestyle, but I wasn't doing my consistent training. So I trained maybe 3 times while we were away, and definitely not like I normally do. Not as intense, not about progressive overload. It was more about getting a pump. So my training was different. My activity level was different. I'm sure my fluid balance was impacted. And that's another thing Mary Grace and I talked about on the cruise. Bowel changes, digestion changes, and fluid retention. You know, like I said, I was having a much harder time keeping track of how much water and how many electrolytes I was using, because I was out of my norm there as well. So I didn't have any of that dialed in. So a lot of things were up in the air. So I come back this week, and what I have decided to do is, look, I have my regular meals that I like. And I bought the food. So it's all the stuff that I typically eat. So am I going to end up landing right around where my macros were before the cruise? Absolutely. But am I trying to hit those numbers? No. So it's not that you're not allowed to follow the macros you were on before, because if you have certain meals that you enjoy, meal preps that you do, typical groceries that you buy, typical meals that you make, you're probably going to land close to wherever your macros were before you took a break. Particularly in a situation like this where you go on vacation, it's short term, and you get home and you get back to your norm. And if you have not been doing any of this for a while, you may not have any idea of what you're even eating at home. And that's an even easier way to baseline than coming back from a vacation or coming back from dining out a lot. Because if you're already cooking and preparing certain meals, all you have to do is measure it. All you have to do is measure what you're consuming. If you're making recipes, measure the recipes. You can create a recipe in Chronometer or whatever tracking app you use, and then you can utilize that recipe whenever you eat that meal for tracking purposes. In my case, I do very simple meals. So it's not like a lot of recipes. It's not a lot of ingredients. So I just I'm getting back to my norm. But one thing that I did I don't know why, when did I start tracking? The day I officially was home. I didn't even track on my travel day. So the day I got home was Saturday. We got home on a red eye. So we got home at like 6:30 in the morning. And then we slept until noon. So Saturday. Yeah. So Saturday, and we also didn't have a lot of food yet because I don't think I'd gone grocery shopping until Sunday. Yeah, so I ate some salmon that I bought in Seattle. Eggs. I made my favorite little protein snack, my yogurt, my frozen yogurt protein bark. If you want that recipe, check out my Keto Bikini Kitchen account on Instagram. I posted the recipe there. I think I also posted it on my main Instagram and on the Academy Instagram, but you'll probably find it the fastest on Keto Bikini Kitchen because it was somewhat recent. But I make that with egg life wraps and protein powder and coconut yogurt. And then I had some lamb, cooked in lamb tallow with more coconut yogurt and olive oil. And I had another little protein treat as my dessert. So at the end of that day, I ended up in an interesting place with my macros that is different than what I had been doing prior to the cruise. My protein was actually a little lower than usual. My carbs were my carbs were around 30 grams, which I had been doing higher carbs before the cruise because I knew I was going to be eating higher carbs on the cruise. So my carbs had probably been around 50 or so before the cruise. So this was actually a little bit lower than where they were before. And my fat was high. My fat was about 150 grams. So my fat was higher than my protein. This is not normally something that I do. Usually my protein and fat will be 1 to 1. They'll be about the same in grams. or my protein might be a little higher than my fat. So this is definitely higher fat. So when I noticed that, I said, you know what, I'm going to go with it this week because I had been eating carbs on the cruise. I want to take those back out again as I start my cut. So let's just go ketogenic and lean into the higher fat, slightly lower protein, and lower carbs. So the rest of this week so far, it's been about the same. My protein's been around 120, carbs around 30, fats between 140 and 150. Yep, it's the same thing all these days. So I'm not trying to hit those numbers. I'm not forcing myself into those numbers. I'm not limiting or trying to manipulate my meals in a way that I hit those numbers. It's just kind of where it landed. And so I kind of let it continue going in that direction by adding more tallow to my lamb, for example. I just made ground beef for dinner and I added tallow to that. My coconut yogurt is pretty high fat, so when I like to do that with my ground beef or ground lamb bowls, and then I top it with a little olive oil, like a labneh kind of idea. So that always boosts the fat up. Whenever I do scrambled eggs, I do it with my yogurt, my coconut yogurt and olive oil. So that boosts the fat up. Versus if I'm making fried eggs, I just do the fried eggs and I don't add any fat to it, for example. I just bought a couple of ribeyes today because I said, well, all right, if I'm going to lean into doing a little bit higher fat, I'm just going to let myself have some ribeyes. I bought some salmon, which is pretty fatty, smoked salmon, which is about 1-to-1 protein to fat. So I'm just going to kind of like let that continue to play out. I think it'll help with the transition of now I should have all the carbs out of my system. And if you didn't see our coffee chat yesterday, we have a new partner for our coffee chat, Keto Brains, which is an amazing nootropic creamer for coffee, which is high fat. It has MCT in it. So it's a coconut milk powder base. So I've been putting that in my coffee in addition to my nut pods and my additional MCT oil. So my coffees are a little bit fattier. So I'm kind of leaning into that right now. We're going to see how I feel the rest of this week and see what happens on the scale. I'm already down 2 pounds from getting home. I got home literally 2 pounds above where I was before I left. And I had a feeling that over the first couple of days, those 2 pounds would come off, and they have. So now I'm sitting right at 120. So I'm eating 1 gram per pound of my current body weight in protein, and I'm eating more than that in fat right now. So I'm sitting still around the low end of what my maintenance calories were before I left for the cruise. And I've taken off the extra weight, which I'm going to say weight, not fat, because it's water weight and inflammation. Generally, you're going to have some of that from traveling, even if you ate to plan and you followed macros and you tracked every single day of your vacation. It's very likely you're going to come home with some inflammation anyway. And in my case, I think it was more from the travel and the carbs. And so a couple of days later, boom, it's back off. So now I'm kind of sitting right at that maintenance from before. So now I'm going to kind of take notice of where those macros are sitting. It doesn't matter if I didn't hit these I don't need to be within a certain range of these macros. It could be totally different every day if I wanted to. The only thing that matters is that you're tracking it all. So don't think that baselining means you need to be dialed into certain numbers. It's more about eating intuitively with what you have, even if it's your norm when you are on a meal plan or a macro plan, and then looking at where the numbers land. So a good rule of thumb or tip I have for baselining is take out your food you're going to eat, weigh it out, eat however much of it you want to eat. If you're full and you don't want to finish it, don't finish it. Weigh what's left. Or if you want more, weigh out some more and eat some more. Like, kind of tune into that intuition of how much do I want? Do I want more? Don't judge yourself for wanting more. Eat what you're going to eat, track it all, plug it in, and then just see where the numbers land at the end of the day. After a week of doing that and watching the scale and watching your other biometrics and biofeedback, you can make an assessment of, all right, what happened this week or over these weeks of baselining? So at the end of your baselining time frame, you want to determine, have I been losing on the scale? Have I been losing body fat? Have I been changing my body composition? Am I gaining on the scale? Am I gaining weight? Am I gaining body fat? Am I gaining muscle? What are my metrics showing me? Take photos. So I'm going to be taking photos. I did not take photos this past weekend, and that was a mistake. The best thing I could have done was get up on Sunday, after one day of getting home, go ahead and take those starting photos. So there we go. I can do that tomorrow because it's still early in the week. So I'll take photos tomorrow, and then at the end of the week, which will be the end of my baselining time frame, so Saturday or Sunday, I'll take photos again. I can look at all the data and say, all right, if I'm maintaining and nothing seems to be changing, then I know I'm sitting at my maintenance. And I can look at the average macros, average protein, average carbs, average fat, average calories for the week. And I can say, all right, here's what I'm eating on average, and here's what's happening with my body with that average. That's how you baseline. You've got to go off the averages, not off of an individual day. So at the end of that week, you look at the average, you say, okay, if on average, my protein was 120, my carbs were 30, and my fats were 150, that's maintenance for me if nothing changes. If I'm not, now, if I continue to drop on the scale and I end up down another 2 pounds, and now I'm 2 pounds down from where I was before I left, eating at this level, then I'm already in a deficit. That means I am not at maintenance, I am in a deficit. If I continue to gain with what I'm consuming, then I'm in a surplus. So then I can make my decision from there to say, okay, if I'm going into a cut, I now need to establish my macros for cutting. And that is another masterclass. And I do have a cutting masterclass. But establishing your macros for cutting come from the baselining process. Once you know where you're starting from, you can determine where you want to go and how you're going to get there. I hope that makes sense. Let me know if it landed for you. Drop a comment. Does anybody have, while we're still live, any questions about the process of baselining? Is anything confusing to you? Did it all make sense? Is anybody still on? Bueller? I know there's a delay, so I'm going to hang out for a minute. Also, just so that y'all know, I got this question on our coffee chat the other day, and I did not answer it there. I just realized. I will be doing another series this year on my YouTube following through my prep. So I'm going to start with giving y'all an update or a recap of my off season, where I'm starting from, all my baseline data that I just shared with you all at the end of this week, and what my plans are for my prep this year, because I'm about to be on prep as of this coming Sunday. That's going to be day one of prep, starts then. We are, Mary Grace, you ready for this? We are this Thursday, technically. We are 15 weeks out to the Olympia Angel Competition Bikinis fashion show stage. So 15 weeks. And for me, I'm aiming to lose about 12 to 15 pounds in that time. Is that accurate? No. 10. About 10 pounds over the next 15 weeks leading into the Olympia. And then I have 2 shows lined up after that in November and December. So I'll continue to cut for those shows. My goal this year is to absolutely shred to the bone. Like I'm going to be peeled like I've never been before for stage. So I'm trying to reach new levels. So I can't wait. I'll share with y'all every single week like I did. I don't think I did it every week last year, but I'm going to aim to do an update video every week with an update on what's happening in my prep, what I'm changing, when I'm changing it, why I'm changing it, the whole process, so you can follow that and learn from that. I also owe y'all a video all about my friend Robert Sykes' protocol, the Savage system that I used last year for my prep. I've been meaning to do a full review video on that, and I want to do that before I get into this prep, because I will be incorporating some lessons learned through utilizing his protocol this year. I have been thinking back over the years of coaches that I've worked with and preps that I've done on my own or with other coaches, and I'm kind of starting to pull pieces from all of the different things that I've done to create what will become the KBB method. So then I can write my book about keto bikini prep. So I'll be pulling a little bit from Robert. I'll be pulling from my past coaches and my experience thus far, what has really worked well for me. And so I'll talk about what that looks like, what my plans are, and all that good stuff. I know, Amanda, right? I'm saying it again out loud so I can make good on it. Because I just told Bronson, I was like, I want to do that. I need to do that video about the Savage system. He said, I thought you already did it. And I said, well, I talked about it and I promised it, but I never did it. So yes, I have been talking about making that video for like a year almost. Ever since I got off stage. It was December. So yeah, I've been talking about it for like 6 months. Here we go. Yep, Kim is right there with me. She is baselining with me. She just got back from the cruise as well, and she is closer to her show than mine because she'll be on stage at the Angel Competition Bikinis Fashion Show in Nashville on August 8th. So 6 weeks out this coming weekend. So exciting. She looks amazing though. I cannot wait. It's the last 6 weeks of any prep are the best in my opinion. It's just, you start to see all the changes. It's so exciting. Amanda asks, which category are you aiming for? So I will likely, my plan right now, the fashion show obviously is just a fashion show. So I'm not going to be judged. But my first competition in November in Vegas. So I'll be in Vegas in October, in Vegas again in November. The FMG Pro-Am in Vegas in November, I will likely do wellness again. The feedback I got from my last show was wellness, wellness, wellness. I did the wellness and the bikini athletic category. And for bikini athletic, all the judges' feedback was wellness. Too much lower body. So I will do wellness again in Vegas, and hopefully we'll get feedback back in time before the December show, because they're only a few weeks apart. So it's possible I may not get that feedback in time. But based on how that show goes in terms of placings, I would like to do fitness. And I'm thinking I don't want to do it in Vegas for the first show, but I'm thinking it will be in December in Mexico. And I might do a crossover. I might do both wellness and fitness, depending on how Vegas goes. But my goal, my plan is to get leaner than I've ever been before. And so I've never seen my body that lean. And so it's very possible that when I get as lean as I need to be competitive, that my body evens out and I have more proportional upper body to lower body mass. And if that's the case, then I will definitely go for fitness in addition to wellness. But we will see. It all kinds of depends. So fun stuff. It's always a fun time talking about prep and going through it. I'm really excited. I'm ready to prep. ready to get into the mindset after dining out every single day. I mean, those of you who, a lot of y'all can relate to this. You go on vacation. At first, it's nice to have a break from your norm, from the structure of everything. But usually, pretty quickly, you're like, all right, I'm over this. Let me get back to my meals. I am so happy to be back to my meals, my regular meals, my favorite meals. And to not have digestive upset, to not have bloat, to not have to worry about what's in my food, all that good stuff. So, yeah. Yes, Amanda, I was thinking about you because I know you just recently went through that on your vacation. Yes, yes, yes. And Mary Grace said, let's effing go. Prep time, prep mode. All right, ladies, that's all I have for you tonight. If you stayed until the end, shout out to all of you still on with me. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here live and for commenting. And next week will be Q&A. Ask me anything. So feel free to drop a question in the Facebook group, here on YouTube, or DM me on Instagram, and I will be collecting all those questions, topics you want me to cover, or just going to talk about whatever you want to talk about next week. So I will see you next Monday. Happy baselining. Bye.